Hi, my name is Dan Detmers, and on the occasion of the ASRE Centennial, I'm here interviewing Mr. George Briley, who became an ASHRAE member back in 1953. So, Mr. Briley, or can I say George?
Sure. Why not?
All right, George, would you give me a brief biographical sketch of your life?
Yes, I was born in a little town in Louisiana. I actually lived on a cotton farm most of my early days. And went through school there. Graduated from high school when I was 16 and started college, and this was right before World War II. Didn't get many months in until I had to go into the service. I went because I wanted to. And
Which branch?
I was in the Army Corps of Engineers eventually, started off with infantry basic, and then was lucky enough to get transferred into something where it was not quite so restricted as the infantry was. And spent about 3 years, a little bit more in the service during World War II in France and Germany and Austria and Italy and some of those little bitty places in between. Corps of Engineers, which was called combat engineers in those days. We picked up mines, laid mines, built bridges, blew up bridges. We had lots of fun. Got to blow up aircraft after the war was over. That was the only time it was really fun. Got involved in the Battle of the Bulge, digging foxholes for the infantry in the ice. And the ground was frozen and they couldn't dig a foxhole. So if they had to retreat, we were right behind the main line, so we dug foxholes for them. So they could keep, if they needed them. Fortunately, they never needed them. But we just left a whole bunch of holes in the farmer's grounds there, I guess. But anyway, when I got out of the service, I was very fortunate. Uncle Sam helped pay for my education after that at Louisiana Polytech, where I got a degree in engineering, electrical engineering. When I got out of school in '49, I had several opportunities to go to work for several people. The telephone company guy wanted to hire me, and he was going to pay me a lot of money, but I asked him what I had to do to start. He said, well, you might have to climb poles for a couple of 3 years. And I said, I climbed enough poles when I was in the service. I'll see you later. And then a guy from a city service refinery in Lake Charles wanted to hire me real bad. And I says, what am I going to do when I go to work? He says, well, you've been on drafting board for about 3 years probably. And I said, well, I flunked drafting and I hate it. I don't want any part of it, so I'll see you too. And he offered me a nice salary. And then I had already been talking to York about their college training program. And they had an 18 months college training program. It was sort of like getting your doctor's degree in refrigeration. 6 months in the classroom and then a year on the job training in all kind of areas, from engineering to even construction in those days, worked out installing equipment. And for about 1/3 the salary I was going to get with any of these other people, but I figured I can get an education. I wasn't married. I had an opportunity to learn what I was going to be doing, hopefully for the rest of my life. Turned out that way too, but I went through that training program. They shipped me to Houston to work, to be eventually a sales engineer, and you had to go through a little bit of indoctrination, and all of a sudden I'm a project engineer for about a year. Followed another old-time salesman around for about a year, and then I was a sales engineer for York. I did some work up in New York for them. Then I went back to Houston as the regional manager for about 10, 11 states. And I survived there for about 3 or 4 years. Decided I didn't like what was there, and they were changing management, and I went to work for the brick company in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. Field sales manager. Sound like a real nice deal. And it was. The only thing, we had 6 presidents while I was there, and that sort of turned me off. And
how many years were you there?
Just 2.
6 presidents in 2 years?
And, and I had no problem with this. I was having a tough time educating presidents. So Lewis Refrigeration was looking for people, and I knew all the folks in Lewis. They were old York people, and a couple of them I'd worked indirectly with a couple of them when I was at York. And So I wanted to get in the contracting business anyway, design, build type stuff. So I went to work for Lewis, worked for them for, out of Houston. I started an office down there. Did all kind of food work and also sold in the petrochem area. Did packaging and that kind of thing. And that lasted until '76. And Lewis got bought out by Toromont.
Yeah.
And I couldn't
At
get
that
along
point,
too well.
you were what, about a vice president?
I was a vice president of
Yeah.
Lewis, yeah, and on the board of directors and all this kind of good
Okay.
stuff. But anyway, the guy who was running the company at the time, Toromont, that bought Lewis, he was one of these guys that he wasn't like having a new president all the time, but he changed his mind about every 3 months. And that didn't work too well. And so I eventually wound up working for Refrigeration Engineering San Antonio in 1976 until they sold out to York in '89. I was a vice president of that company also, and I was in charge of marketing and actually research. Those two don't sound like they go together, but that's what I was doing. And when York bought Refrigeration Engineering, they didn't think a guy 65-year-old should be working there, I guess, and they didn't tell me I had to go, but they made things such that I felt I better go. It was, I thought I was going to retire. Well, after about 3 months, my wife kicked me out of the house, so I had to go back to work. And that's when I started technical services, and that's where I am today, a consultant in industrial refrigeration.
Okay. When did you get married?
In 1950, I married a girl from York that I met when I was up there in the training program.
Oh, yeah? What'd she do there?
She was a school teacher, taught middle school. And she taught a little bit after we moved to Houston. But all of a sudden we had a little boy and then a little girl, and she quit working, so she hadn't worked since. She says that's not true, that she works all the time, of course, but you've been down that road
Yeah,
too.
I'm going down that road right now, yeah.
You
Yeah.
bet. And they have 2 kids, boy and a girl. The boy has 2 children. My daughter has 3 boys. So I've got quite a few grandkids. Some of them are in Denver, but the others are right down the street from me in San Antonio, so I get to see them all the time.
Get any of them into refrigerating engineering yet?
Nope, haven't done very much good at that. Tried to get my son into it, but he didn't care for this engineering stuff. That didn't thrill him a bit.
Yeah, not surprising. My dad was
Yeah.
trying to get me to become a veterinarian, and here I am.
Right, and I can understand that one too.
Yep.
It's funny, a lot of kids can follow their parents very well, but some of them just don't like what they see. And my son helped in the office. He could do it. He was a pretty good little draftsman. He used to do a lot of drafting work with the guys, and he worked in the shop some, and that wasn't a problem in the summertime, but making it permanent, he wasn't too happy with that.
Well, what attracted you to refrigeration in the first place? Not having to blow up airplanes, not climbing up the poles. Was it just a good alternative?
What did attract me? That was interesting in that one of my best friends in college, in fact, was my best friend in college, and I were talking about what we were going to do when we got out of school, and he said, hey, there used to be a guy that lived in Shreveport, Louisiana, where we lived, and he worked for your corporation, and he was talking about what great programs they had for training people. He says, and maybe you ought to check into it. I actually checked into 2 or 3 people, GE, Westinghouse, and others, but they didn't thrill me a lot. And I had got a lot of information from York, and they sent somebody to see me. I didn't even have to go see them.
Okay.
So I felt like they were interested, and that's how I got there. And I said, okay, this sounds like a good way to make a living. It was an easy choice, really. It was.
Okay.
I wanted to be educated before I got out and tried to sell somebody's products or install it or any other thing.
They made that easy for you.
That made it easy. Yeah.
All right. So what about back in, you started ASHRAE in 1953. What got you involved there at that point?
Well, at that time I was selling York's products, both air conditioning and refrigeration. And most of the people who were involved in the industry were in ASHRAE in those days. And it was just a logical place for me to go. And ASRE wasn't strong in Houston exactly. I mean, they were there, but not that strong. And we could join one organization at the time, budget problems, you know, so I just picked that because I thought it made sense. And they had excellent text by then that they had inherited from the ASHRE days. So that helped a lot too. I was really impressed with it.
Did you first get started at the local level?
Absolutely. I was at all the meetings, and I think I was an officer at one time, a vice president or something of the chapter. At that time I wound up in Rochester, so I never really went any further than that in the locals.
Okay.
Actually, I haven't been very active in local groups. I don't know, I got involved in the national and felt like that was the place I ought to be in the first
Too
place.
busy educating all of us across the nation to educate the local? Well, when did you get involved at the national level?
Late 60s.
Okay.
I got on R&T early in my, which was research and now it's broken into 3 groups, I think.
Sure.
Something like that. But
Okay.
before that, we did everything. I mean, the whole thing. Research project came in, you went through the whole routine, you know, which you don't do today. It's
Right.
totally different.
Broken up among many different people.
Yes, it was a different kind of situation. Most of the people that were on that committee were professors or somebody like that. I was the first business person that ever served on R&T.
Bring an entirely different perspective.
I'm sure that's why they did it. And I'd gotten to know some of the people that were on there.
Well, so why are you still active in ASHRAE? I have to ask that.
Well, I'll put it this way. I think I owe the industry something. It's been good to me.
I don't know. You've been pretty good to the industry, I have to say. But
No, it's you get involved. I've made my living at this. I'm trying to pay back some of it. It's been good to me.
That's good. Well, we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Still being here. So what about somebody new, someone young coming into the industry? Some kids coming out of mechanical engineering school. Why should they go into refrigeration?
Good place to be. It's interesting. The good part about the refrigeration area rather than the air conditioning area is that it's usually one of a kind of thing, and it's something that'll make you think and keep you busy. And if you like being an engineer, so to speak,
Right.
There's a place to go. It's you don't want to go out and work with guys who sell packages or draw packages on a piece of paper. If you want to be an engineer, it's a place to go.
Good place to be thinking
Darn
every
right.
single
It'll
day.
keep you busy. You bet.
And what about, what would you suggest for a career path for someone younger? Where should they start? Where should they progress?
Well, not many people have those neat training programs like York had. They can't afford to do it, I'm told. They give you 6 weeks and throw some books at you and say, go get them. And that's not very good in my opinion. Best place to go is probably with a good contractor who's got a design build contractor who understands the refrigeration, has some sharp engineers in it, and that's how you can learn. You can start off at the bottom working as a gopher and then work yourself up through the project engineering work and on to design and that kind of thing. So you got to start a lot lower than I had to start. I started way up there when I got out of the training program, and that was the whole idea of the training program, obviously. Most of the people that were in my class by the time they had been out in the field for 3 or 4 years were in the top 10 sales engineers at York.
Wow. They're quite the class. So what about ASHRAE for young people?
Well,
How much should they get involved? Where should they get involved?
get involved locally, get the feel of the industry there, and a lot of the chapters have some little training for young folks. I know the one in San Antonio, they have a little class in basic refrigeration or air conditioning before the meeting.
Sure.
And if you, let's say, participate, you can learn something there. A lot of the chapters have excellent programs. I mean, you can learn a lot there if you want to learn, want to pay attention.
All right. Let's see. Going back to the industry. So when you first started getting into the refrigeration industry, back coming out of the war, what were some of the major issues facing the industry at that time? And have we solved them yet?
Growing pains.
Sure, I suppose, right after World War II.
This was 49. Of course, it had about 3 years, but still, all the companies, I don't care which one it was having growing pains. And all of a sudden, in about 1954, 55, the refrigeration business, I'm not talking about air conditioning, refrigeration business just went booming in the petrochemical area.
Oh, okay.
And I can remember 18 months shipping times. So that tells you something about this growing pains thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I saw that in spades. York was only selling $80 million worth of equipment. Today they're $4 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, you were looking at small companies in those days. Carrier was bigger, but not that much bigger. It was just one of those things.
Yeah. What other issues have you faced over the years, or what major issues do you think the industry has faced?
I think you mean changes, or
big changes.
Big changes came about in this
either
industry.
From regulation or market
Well,
pressure.
that's later, but
Yeah.
let's start off back in the 30s when the halocarbons, chlorofluorocarbons came in, and it changed the industry. It changed the whole situation for just about everybody. That was a major, not upset, but a change, or progressive change in the industry. And of course, most of those refrigerants came along 12, 11 in the 30s, 35, was somewhere along there. 22 didn't come around until about 1950.
Yeah.
And that changed things too. But I think refrigerant changes, which we see today even worse, caused by all the, I'm going to say that, caused by some.
I can imagine what you're going to say. But.
Anyway, so that's the problem. The problem is that we're now sitting here facing OSHA, EPA, the ozone layer. Those were major things. That's 15 years ago, I guess, this got started. And that's been a monster change in our industries, all of them, air conditioning and refrigeration. But it has bothered refrigeration people more because of the OSHA requirements for our food operations.
Okay. So, well, I got to ask this question then. What's your favorite refrigerant?
Ammonia.
I just wanted to get that one on tape.
Anyway. And I can tell you the next one too, CO2.
Okay, prediction.
I'll tell you why I like that. In my days in the refrigeration industry, I got involved in the merchant carbon dioxide business because I went out and saw how they were producing merchant carbon dioxide, which was pure carbon dioxide. They were pumping CO2 with these great big compressors with 4 stages in them and pumping it up to real high pressures and condensing it.
Is that a bunch of the petrochemical refrigeration you talked about?
Yeah, you saw some of the stuff today. That was an interesting project, and I looked at one of these and I said, my gosh, I can do this for a lot less horsepower. So I started pumping CO2 with actually oil-free compressors early in the game. This is in the late 60s. And condensing it 250 pounds, which was the pressure that they were moving it around the country in at the time in the trucks. So now this is silly. Why do we want to go all the way up to 6 or 8 or 1,000 pounds or something to condense this CO2? This costs money. So we built one in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and that started all this. And then we used recips for a while. And we were getting into big plants and horizontal compressors, the big-time petrochem type, and they were every 6 months having to change the Teflon rings in them. And that was a week or 2 weeks of production lost. And one of our good customers says to me one day, I want you to put screw compressors on our CO2. It's wet, saturate. So what happens? Call all the manufacturers of screws that I knew at the time. I says, can we do this? I says, no, you can't do that. I said, yes, we can. So once I got our boss to agree to maybe cost him $50,000 or $100,000, we were going to try this. The first plant we built is still running in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
It's 18, 19 years old. Never had a problem with rust or anything in the compressors like they told us they were going to do, because when we shut the CO2 compressors down, we just purged it with dry CO2. Got all the moisture out of it. Never had a rust problem in a CO2 compressor, period. Never. And we did, I bet, 50,000 horsepower worth of CO2 compression out of refrigeration engineering. And we had no guarantees in the early days. They wouldn't guarantee the compressors. We guaranteed the compressors. Now they'll sell you one anytime, of course, after we proved that it would work.
Right. But was this with Lewis Refrigeration?
No, this was with Rico.
Okay.
Some of it was with Lewis, but we weren't into the screw compressors until I got to Rico.
Okay.
We had used screw compressors on the high side of those, but we were still using recips when I was at Lewis. We were selling the units in those days too. We were packaging them and shipping them out in 2 or 3 packages and interconnecting them, and away they went. Yep, that was a real interesting process.
What other large projects did you work on, or revolutionary or evolutionary projects?
While I was at Lewis, and I was involved in installing the stuff and then helping put it together, but it was a great big freeze-dry system. Had 10,000 horsepower and
Wow.
1,000 horsepower centrifugal compressors running at -70.
Wow.
That was a nice system. It had 220,000 pounds of R12 in it.
What were you freeze drying?
It's for coffee, freeze-dry coffee for Maxwell House in Houston. Yep, it was some kind of plant.
Wow. Any other ones?
No. Lots of big plants. When Enrico did a tremendous amount of work in the chicken processing area, poultry. And we had plants that had 5 different temperatures and 12, 15,000 horsepower. They were big, and we didn't do one of those. We did several. I think it was 5 or 6 like that. It was up, and of course with Tyson, who's the biggest business, you know, and I was just in a Tyson pig plant last week, and they had 15,000 tons of refrigeration in that plant. Screw compressors everywhere you looked.
So what major events or technological changes do you think have really changed this industry over your lifetime?
Well, I think the biggest change, which was forced by the growth of frozen foods, I would have to say, was a screw compressor.
Okay.
Ignored by American manufacturers for years, and had to go to Europe to get one, or Japan. And that's what we did at Lewis. We brought the first screw compressor for ammonia into the United States from Howden in Scotland.
What year was that?
67.
Okay.
And that was when things really changed dramatically, because there were demands for a lot more tonnage. They were freezing 100,000 pounds of French fries an hour and these kind of things. Rotary boosters and recips, the engine rooms would have been bigger than the manufacturing facility.
Sure.
So as we came in with 500, 750, 1,000 horsepower machines, we could give these people refrigeration for a lot less money, number one, and in a lot less space. And that was what really was a major change in the industry. Started in the 60s, really got going in the early 70s, when FES got in the packaging area, and then Frick got in the packaging area, and it was way into the late 70s before Frick really got into manufacturing. They finally got into the screw compressor business.
Okay.
They were packaging other people's screws for a while.
What about people-wise? What people do you think influenced the industry? What people influenced you? Who would you consider a mentor?
I think, well, I don't know if he's a mentor or not, but a guy named Joe Chamberlain, who used to work for York for many years, our chief engineer. He was a real influence. He and I used to go at it all the time.
In friendly way? Or?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay.
He used to get mad at me when I didn't want to do things exactly like he wanted to do them, but he had real good ideas and he was a sharp cookie. He put a little imprint on ASHRAE too.
Yeah, how so?
Well, he had to do with a lot of codes, a lot of the early 15s, I missed the name right now, but they had a lot to do with the 15.
Okay.
Was 9.1 or something like that at one
Right,
time.
back
you
at
know,
that point,
way
the
back,
engine
way
room.
back there, yeah.
Okay. When did he work at York, or?
Oh, he was there when I went there, and he was there into the late 60s and maybe into the 70s.
Okay.
He retired an old man. I think he stayed there well past his 65. He was one of those guys that came to work early in the morning and left late.
So, on a side question, what do you think it is about refrigeration engineers? Why do you keep working so long? You and Milt Garland and...
We don't want to die. We figure if we keep working, we keep active, we're better off.
Yeah.
I've had too many friends who became vegetables after they retired early and didn't do anything but goof off, and you can't do that. You got to keep your mind working and keep yourself busy. And
So it isn't just love of the industry?
Well, part. Yeah, it's a little of both. What else do I know? You know, I can go out and hit a golf ball or something like that, but I get a lot more out of working in the business, and I don't work myself to death. I take time off, and wife and I go on 2 or 3, 4 day little vacation, mini vacations a lot. And
Okay.
I don't work 50, 60 hours a week. I don't even put in 40 most of the weeks, put in 35, something like that. I'm beginning to take it a little easier.
Except for when I'm pressing you to put together
Yeah,
a
well,
presentation.
some of those cost me some time, you know.
Yeah.
But that's not unusual. That's
Okay.
to be expected. When you say, I'll do this, you got to do it, you know.
Yeah. Was there anyone else that had a major influence on your career, or would you consider a major influence on the industry?
Oh, there's been had a lot of people that had an influence on my career, but it was a bad influence. I don't want to mention those.
I mean, what about Lewis Refrigeration? Now, you know that I saw that sheet of the people that work there, and it kind of reads pretty much like a who's who of ASHRAE right now.
Well,
I mean, I saw you and Jim Shepard was on
right
there.
there, yeah. And I forget exactly. Bud Overby was not very active in any kind of organization, and you know, but he was a power. He was the guy that came up with this idea to IQF vegetables. He's the guy that really developed it. Now, the people had been playing around with it for years and pumping air the wrong way and not pumping enough, and Bud was a real good engineer, although I don't think he graduated from college.
Oh, yeah?
No, I don't think he ever had. And Bob Lucas was a good engineer too. He was the other partner there that you saw the picture of.
Okay.
And he was a good engineer too. He was an old Baker person, like the guy was.
Oh, yeah.
He worked for Baker before Baker got burned down in '35,
Okay.
and or what, somewhere in the '30s. But yeah, he was a pretty sharp cookie. He knew the business well. He was great in concrete cooling.
Oh, yeah?
We did a lot of that kind of thing at Lewis. He did most of it himself. But,
Explain that.
well, when you pour concrete in mass like you do in a great big dam, you can either put pipes in it and pump water through it, like the dam out there around Las Vegas. They're still pumping water through there, and it still has about a ½ degree rise. And that was put into a British valve.
Excuse me. Sorry, we're taping.
Anyway, so most of the structures were built, the bigger ones, with concrete being cooled to 40 degrees, and they use air to cool the rock. They use types of devices to cool the sand, and they put ice in where they would normally put water,
Okay.
so that they can get to 40 degrees to pour it. They can pour the concrete. There's a lot of BTUs coming out every pound when it sets.
Sure.
So when they pour it at 40 degrees, it doesn't crack, and they don't have to have the water pumped through it and that kind of thing.
Okay.
There's still some people using that process. Aren't many places to build a dam today, unfortunately.
Not here in the U.S. though.
That's right. And even when they're building that big dam in China, they're doing that with rocks and soil. They're not using any concrete at all, and that would sort of bother me, but that's neither here nor there. It'd probably kill 2 or 3 million people if it ever breaks up.
Yeah.
Real good earthquake would be some fun there. You know, that's what I worry about when you see some of these dams that are made with rock, and some of them have a little cement in them that have just rock, and they try that deal. I was involved in a whole bunch of the smaller dams in Arkansas and Louisiana, where we just needed ice. They didn't have to pour at 40 degrees like the big structures. They poured it, I don't know, 50, 55. But you still had to use some ice, so we sold them ice and some cold water.
Wow. Is there any industry you haven't touched, or?
Well, there's somebody that's always asking me that question. I'm sure they are, but I don't know where they are. Well,
let me get through some of these other questions. So what do you think the ASHRAE has done as far as the industry's growth, as far as aiding the industry? Is that ASHRAE
let me tell you what, I always look at ASHRAE like this. It's part of the wheel. And then you got to have manufacturers, contractors, owners, everybody. I would say ASHRAE is one of the spokes on the wheel. They're a part of the business, and they've done great things for the industry. The data books, very important to the industry. There's an awful lot of engineering comes out of the ASHRAE organization. So share your wealth kind of thing, which is hard for a lot of people to believe, but that's what happens. People don't mind sharing their knowledge, and that's what makes the world go round.
True. Let's see, what other questions have they given me?
You're about a half an hour.
Okay. Well, I'll just leave it as any other parting thoughts or statements. ASHRAE Centennial, where do you think ASHRAE should go in the future? Are we on the right track?
I think we're on the right track. Need to keep going in the direction we're going in. I spent a lot of time with various and sundry portions of ASHRAE. I think probably the thing that I spend most of my time with is ASHRAE Safety Code 15, which is very important to the industry. Very important to the industry.
I would agree.
And also all the refrigeration TCs, refrigeration groups. Hope I can continue to do that.
And let's see, you've written 29 articles so far?
I have been writing an article every month for the ASHRAE Journal. It's called Refrigeration Applications, and they allow me about 900 or 1,000 words. And I try to condense an application into that, and that isn't always easy, but it seems to be informative. I get an awful lot of comments about it, and they get a lot of hits on it, they say. So I guess it must be working, because they keep bugging me to keep it up.
How many more are you going to write?
I don't really know, but I'll tell you, and when I got to about 25, I started, wait a minute, I better start looking back and see where I am. I better go back all these so I don't do it again, you know. And that's number one. Number two, I'm running out of certain things that I have written for other reasons. And I have all the information there. All I have to do is condense it down to the 1,000 words or something like that and make it readable. It's sometimes not that easy when I take something that has 24 pages and I try to make 1 page out of it. It's a challenge. It's the right word for it. So yeah, I hope I continue. Every once in a while somebody gives me a good idea. Like I got a couple while I was here.
Well, keep writing and I'll keep reading.
We'll do it.
All right. Well, thank you much, George.
You're welcome. Enjoyed it. It was fun.